commemorating the 25th anniversary of 9/11. Behind the Lines, a 9/11 story, is a powerful new production led by acclaimed jazz trumpeter and composer and modern warrior creator Dominick Farinacci, and tells a deeply moving story of survival, service, and unexpected connection. The show also introduces us to FDNY firefighter Bill Spade, who survived the collapse of the World Trade Center, the sole survivor from FDNY Rescue Company 5, and U.S. Army veteran James Poling, who served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne Division. And these three gentlemen join us today. Dominic, first of all, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Good to see you again.
Bill, I know you're spending some time in Florida, but you reside in Staten Island. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
And James Poling, thank you for your service, first of all, as well. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Now, while these are private preview performances taking place on March 13th and 16th at New York City's The Sheen Center, there will be public performances later this year. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to when these performances will actually be scheduled. But let's start with you, Dominick Farinacci. This is a much needed program because every time that I pass a park, a memorial park, it could be a small one, it could be a large one, it could be the World Trade Center Memorial. 25 years coming up in September for 9/11. Some people that are around right now don't have really a lot of knowledge about what took place. Tell us why you wanted to create 9/11, Behind the Lines, a 9/11 story.
Well, I know we all have, for everybody who's old enough, we all have our own deep personal connection to 9/11. And for me, it was the first day of the first class of the jazz studies program at Juilliard on 9/11. And I vividly remember, waking up and seeing downtown what was going on. And fast forward 25 years. I mean, over the course of my career, it's spanned a lot of different directions, and have been really passionate about, using music as a way to kind of integrate important stories and important messages in our culture. And so a few years back, I had an album, short stories that Tommy LaPuma produced, and he introduced me to this song called Soldier's Things by Tom Waits. And in my quest to kind of discover more about the meaning of that song about a soldier returning from war, I ended up meeting James and got to hear his story. And I was so moved by that story of, this life-changing moment that he went through, and how he came back, and how he kind of moved forward, and the resilient aspect, and the aspect of loss, and the full scope of kind of dealing with the, full range of the human condition when you go through trauma. And so James and I have had our flagship show, Modern Warrior Live, touring over the past few years, and now coming up to the 25th anniversary. This is really the impetus story, of course, for why James fought in Afghanistan, and staying with that theme of what our productions are about in terms of life-changing experiences and how they impact you and how you move forward from them. We thought, well, let's bring Bill into the fold to share his story about 9/11, and in the context of the subsequent war with James, and to see how their roads, which are of course vastly different from each other, but really how they have intersected, especially in terms of their process of coming back home and dealing with what they went through.
Yeah, and this is all accomplished through live music, storytelling, and an immersive production. And as you mentioned, both Bill and James, linked by the events of 9/11 and the war that followed, find this unexpected bond in the cost of survival, revealing shared strength, meaning, and the weight they continue to carry after service. And the music, this powerful musical score, is composed and arranged by Dominick Farinacci, and he mentioned Tom Waits, some of the other reimagining of music by Leonard Cohen, Gnarls Barkley, and others through the context of this story. Bill, for you, you'll never forget what took place on 9/11. Take us through a little bit about the company. You lost every member of your company in this tragedy. Tell us what you're thinking about right now.
I'm happy to be involved with this project to keep their memory alive, to keep the memory of everyone that was lost on 9/11 alive, keep it, introduce it to so many new people that were born post 9/11. And that's what's so important. But also with Dominic and James, I'm able to talk about PTSD and what we went through to get back to a new normal, living in society and adapting, and that's what's so important. And then also to get out to young kids about counseling, and really to everyone about counseling. I was never a big believer in counseling, but I did go through 4 years of counseling, which I'm happy to say, and not embarrassed by it at all. And to get that out there that you can heal. Uh, and 25 years later, it's not forgotten by me for sure. And I just hope that with this behind the lines 9/11, that we can make sure that no one forgets the events of 9/11.
When you first got the call, you didn't think it was even a serious call. And many of us, when we first heard about the plane, I remember going on the air and telling people that, a plane, and we had no idea what was actually going on at the time. Can you take us back to 2001?
Yeah, I was at the firehouse that morning, a beautiful Tuesday morning, beautiful weather, blue skies, and just getting into the firehouse. It was full of life. I remember the music was playing in the firehouse and it was lively. And then a short time later, 8:46, when that first plane struck, that I'm assigned to respond into Manhattan, not knowing the scope of what you would be responding to. And then soon as you're responding, and I witnessed the second plane hit the that South Tower, and then realizing the scope of the tragedy and driving into Manhattan and see the bodies and really realizing how many lives were lost already, and we haven't even really begun the day.
Mm.
And then at the end of the day, I was in the hospital, and then I got the call from my brother-in-law who's in Rescue 5 as well, and he tells me all the guys are gone. And I couldn't really comprehend it. I asked him again, "What do you mean?" He said, "Bill, they're all gone." So all the guys I had breakfast with that morning were now gone. And that was so hard to really comprehend. And then also to find out from my wife shortly afterwards that evening that my uncle Joe Driscoll from New Jersey was on Flight 93 that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It really kind of put an exclamation point on the day of the tragedy of 9/11.
And you were told to report to the North Tower, and that's why you weren't with your colleagues in the South Tower, right?
Correct. I initially reported into the Marriott Marquis Hotel, and then was told to go work out of the North Tower. Every every little decision that was made prior to the collapse of those buildings, little things helped save my life, I guess, and that's why I'm here today.
If it's not powerful enough to just hear Bill talk about it, you can imagine during this production with music and him telling his story, how emotional this project is. And someone who knows all about emotion is James Poling as well. James, why did you feel that you had to be a part of this production? I know that you wrote a lot of it, you narrate it, you really wanted to be, involved in this.
Yeah, I think early on when I first met Dominic, and we were working to share kind of my experiences in Afghanistan before we started working with Bill. My initial motivation was to kind of reach out and touch some of my friends who I knew were struggling with some of the same things that I'd struggled with, and honestly continue to struggle with, in a way that you could provide hope, hopefully, and a bit of a roadmap as to how we can work through this. But then also just kind of apply a more positive perspective to some of that, not just to sound optimistic. I mean, I think there was a time when I first got out of the military where the post-traumatic stress awareness campaign felt prescriptive to me. And it took me a while because as I was looking around, I was seeing people with the same symptoms, same experiences. And then there was no shortage of support individuals saying, okay, we get that you've gone through this traumatic experience. It's okay that these are the things that you're struggling with now. And we're going to be here to help you with them moving forward. There weren't many people around me at the time that were saying, if as a society we agree that there's growth opportunity in dealing with adversity, this is another opportunity to deal with adversity and grow from it. And so I think that that's the messaging we wanted to lean into. We found that it resonated with a lot of people around the country, not just veterans, family members, first responders. And as we continued to expand that conversation and come up on the 25th anniversary of 9/11, we were fortunate enough to meet Bill and begin to work with him and bring everything full circle. Because I remember I was in high school on 9/11. I was watching it on TV. It drove a lot of my decisions after that. I knew I wanted to fight after that. And I found the experiences I was looking for after 9/11, in large part because of 9/11. And ultimately, I feel better off because of everything that I'd been through, while at the same time recognizing that it was challenging. The community still continues to struggle with it. And we think that sharing our stories can help them get through it and find a happier day after.
You mentioned that 9/11 fueled your fire to be in the military. I'm curious, once you got to Afghanistan, was it what you thought it would be to be a soldier?
I think that before I joined the military, I had this idea that if I could go place myself in combat, I would, learn who I was at my core. I had kind of this naive idea that, this primal situation must kind of unlock some stuff that I would otherwise have a hard time finding. I think that was naive, but at the same time, I don't think it was wrong. I think that it was everything that I was looking for, but it was so much more than that. A lot of times people will ask me kind of an open-ended question about combat or Afghanistan, and they'll say, "How was that?" And it was 3 years of my life, so it was everything that you could imagine happening in your life over the course of 3 years, but the highs and the lows, of course, being amplified by just the nature of combat.
Dominic, working with both James and Bill, what have you learned about yourself as an American? What have you learned about yourself as a musician? And what have you learned about yourself when it comes to how we can deal 25 years later with 9/11 and what took place?
The thing that resonates most, through this process, and have been working with James for many years, and now with Bill, is normalizing the discussion around mental health, right? On many levels, of course, I can't even begin to understand what James went through or what Bill went through. But the overarching kind of concept of like, going through trauma, we all have gone through things in our own ways, in our own personal lives, and that has impacted our mental well-being, and it's impacted the whole circle around us, right? Of folks around us. And so, just hearing these stories, I'm always just thinking about the mental health side and how we can all kind of start to process what we go through in our own ways, and how we deal with that and what that output looks like. Um, the concept of the idea of, in empowering production, right? That's what this has really turned out to be. I mean, yes, we dig into all the deep, horrific moments of what both of them have been through, and really focus on, them, and their journey of kind of dealing with over the years what they have gone through, and it has a real empowering quality to it, and that I feel that it's really important for me and for everybody really to hear, because I think through the lens of their story and their experiences, they can really provide much needed hope, for people who are struggling, and we all struggle in our different ways, right? So, if you can impact the life of one person, then, you know, mission accomplished for us in terms of, what we want to happen from this production. And of course, making sure that the younger generations know about this. One member of our band, Gabe Jones, in drums, he's 22 years old, right? So he was born after 9/11, and talking to him and talking to a lot of other students we've put this in front of, nobody really understood the gravity of how terrible this was. And for me, that was just mind blowing, right? And so, the education component is very important. But overall, it's really evolved my artistic output, because from the onset, we said, okay, let's create this really unique thing. Like, I don't want actors portraying James or Bill. I don't want it to be a poetic interpretation. I want it to be their words, their story from start to finish, and exactly what it is they want to share. And framing that provides such an incredible, immersive, artistic experience for me and everybody who's involved in the production to really build out every moment of the musical aspect around every word of their story.
Can you talk about some of the musicians, the singers involved in the show?
Of course, of course. So, Jonathan Thomas on piano, who's a great upcoming pianist on the New York scene. He's been with the production for a few years now, and he has just a beautiful sensibility of really kind of serving as the MD in certain capacities. And so it's been him. The drummer is one of my former students. I'm originally from Cleveland, and he was in my program there, Gabe Jones, only 22 years old. He's been with us since he was like 16, 17 years old. Wonderful. Vocalist Chanel Johns has done many years of work with us. She's touring with Winton most recently, and doing all kinds of great stuff on the New York scene. And also Quia Ulrich, another wonderful vocalist from the DC area who's been with us for some time. So a lot of great artists across different musical backgrounds have really surrounded this production, and our wonderful director, Emmett Murphy, he's been with us since day one in really conceiving this whole thing, from Modern Warrior Live, our flagship production with James, to Behind the Lines. So, that having so many great artists and different musical kind of backgrounds surrounding this production, it's not only been an inspiring educational process for us, but it's been a really deeply just moving process on a very human level.
Gnarls Barkley, Crazy, this interpretation of this song. James, you're a big part of this song. And you get extremely emotional during it. Take us into that performance, because it's not a performance, it's real, it's you.
Yeah, very much so. And prior to this too, I didn't really see myself as a writer. That piece around Crazy, actually, when I was trying to, you know, get a little positive momentum after I got out of the military. I first got out and I started bartending and had a rough few months. Really, in retrospect, I could see I was letting myself grieve, some friends and things that I was putting off while I was in. But one of the first classes I signed up for was an English class. The first assignment was a memoir. And so I went to my professor and told her I wanted to write something honest. I wanted to make sure that she was okay with it. I wasn't going to get reported to anybody, kind of let her know a little bit of what I was going to put in there. And what I wrote for that first writing assignment has largely become in the show that piece around Crazy.
Mm.
I think it for me, it was the time where, I was, as I mentioned earlier, grieving for the first time. And it's just the process of going through your day while ultimately, still living in your memories. So I talk about getting up, just getting in the shower. But as I'm doing that, I'm thinking about friends I lost. I'm thinking about, friends I lost both in combat, friends I lost in the States, thinking about their families, their children. And it's definitely an emotional piece, but I think it's something that's relatable too. I think everybody, maybe I shouldn't say everybody, I think plenty of people have those moments where they're struggling a little bit, and they question whether or not they're a little crazy, or at least a certain point in their life they're struggling. They feel like maybe they're not exactly where they want to be, in terms of kind of controlling their own emotions. and it's something that we see the audience connect with, and so it's something that we just want to continue to flush out as we do a lot of the messaging in our stories in a way that feels relatable, that brings people in, and ultimately builds connection between everyone, while highlighting my experience and Bill's experience.
Bill, I don't know how you do it because as that piano is striking just one key at a time, as you are talking about your experiences um, and the memories that surge back to you on that day, talking about you mentioned you had breakfast with your buddies that morning and they're no longer with us. How difficult has it been dealing with the families of your buddies?
It's a new normal. I remember that phrase coming in as I was always the extra guys at the firehouse, because I didn't work again after 9/11 in the firehouse. How was it back at the firehouse? And they always said it's a new normal. Things change, and over time things develop, and people go their ways and all. But we'll always remember the events of that day with Rescue 5 and all the members that were lost. And that's one of the main reasons for me doing it is to keep the memory of everyone alive. And at the end of the show, when we show the members from Rescue 5, it's very moving for me, but also very rewarding to know that I haven't forgotten. And that pledge that I always made that I wouldn't forget lives on now 25 years later.
You have to think there was a reason that you were sent to the North Tower, right? Is to be able to years later to tell the story and to honor those who were in your unit.
Correct. Many years ago, I was doing an interview for the LA Times, and somebody said, you went to the left, you went to the right, and you lived. Why do you think you lived? And I told them, I think God was looking out after me. And the reporter said to me, so God wasn't looking out after all the others? And I was very hurt by that comment and kind of put back. And I said, I'll never do an interview again. And then I spoke to a woman who lost her husband that day, a firefighter. And she said, Bill, you were selected because you would continue to tell the story, and maybe not everybody would. And that's why you were selected to still be around.
Yeah, very tough. And as we watch Behind the Lines, a 9/11 story, um, everyone will have their memories, as you mentioned, Dominic, when we started about 9/11. Gary Walker and I were on the air on WBGO for 8 straight hours that day, and it wasn't until we walked outside and looked at the skyline from our radio station in Newark and looked at the New York skyline and said, everything we just talked about, everything we just mentioned to the audience really happened. And I remember Peter Jennings, the great ABC news anchor, he and I were speaking just right after that. We both had the same impression that as we were relaying life-saving information, we didn't have a chance to process what we were actually saying on the air because it was so, you know, timely to get out this information. You didn't have a chance to reflect. Reflection is a big part of this production, Dominic, and now that it's getting the screening and we'll have public viewing, shortly down the line here this year. You have to be so proud that you've been able to connect not only these two individuals, Bill and James, but you're going to help a whole community who, is still trying to come to grips with what happened 25 years ago.
The power of storytelling, hearing stories from the individuals who has that lived experience, that medium, and the power of music and theater, bringing those two worlds together. Our intent really is so that we can present this in a unique way that really impacts people on such a deep and visceral level, and that gives people a lot of different ways to internalize the story, reflect on the story, learn about it if they didn't know about it, And certainly, the past few years with the touring production with James, Modern Warrior Live, we've really heavily been involved in work with mental health organizations, veteran organizations, all that. And we've seen the empowering quality of this for people to see themselves as resilient, and for those who are struggling to know that there is hope, for growing. And so all of that surrounded by, of course, honoring national hero Bill and James and all those who served and all those who were lost. All of that is an incredibly important thing to do for us. They're very passionate about it, and we're really looking at this year as not just the year for this special production, but the year to begin this special production. Because, we like to look at 25, 50 like clean cut years to celebrate, but these stories need to be told every single day of every single year. And so we're looking at 2026 as really launching this new production that we hope can be a mainstay and for years to come.
I think you mentioned a couple of things that are the most important about this production. That your drummer was 22 and didn't and wasn't around when this took place. And so it's an education for young people. It's honoring those who have served and the reflection on mental health moving forward, how we can deal with what has taken place. James, you mentioned you were a freshman in high school when the towers went down. Now that you have been touring with the production, what have you learned about yourself?
Mm. Um, you know, I learned really how interconnected all of our experiences are. As we've traveled around the country, sharing, the story focused on my experiences prior to this, I saw, you know, countless young people connecting with veterans, seeing, older family members who have served in different lights. I've had children of Holocaust survivors say that they better understand their childhood now. A lot of children of World War II vets talking about conversations around the dinner table, to young people who've lost limbs in car accidents relating to amputee veterans. I think there's so much out there that's already dividing us, that it really is the conversations like this that bring us together, and allow us to focus on what's important and how we can help each other. And I think that the receptivity that we've seen has been the thing that's surprised me the most, and honestly motivated me to continue to do this work moving forward.
We only have a few minutes left, and Bill, I have to ask you, when 9/11 happened, it was one of the few times this country has really came together as a whole. Remember the baseball games and how everybody was cheering, and everybody didn't matter if Mike Piazza played for the Mets or Yankees, right? It what mattered was we were all in this together. Can we get back to that at some point, Bill?
That's a good question. I feel hopeful that we could, and that it doesn't take an event like 9/11 to do it. But those days after 9/11, the weeks, months later, the unity that was involved in this country was unbelievable. And you would hope something like USA hockey, both men and women winning the Olympic gold, would do it, and that doesn't seem to have really worked either. But I hope there's something that we can do. Maybe this show, because James and I are so open, and our conversations about how we went through it. And if everybody to take a deep look at themselves and realize life is short, to wake up each morning is a blessing. And I go to bed every single night and I say, thank you for this day on earth. And if I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to make it a better day. And if we can all do that and just realize life is short and get rid of all the other thoughts and not to have enemies, it's too much thought, work put into having an enemy than rather just to say hello to everyone with a smile. It's much easier.
What a great message, and hug your loved ones each and every day for sure.
Yeah.
Bill, thanks for joining us today, and thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug.
James, thank you for your service again. And this production will eventually get to everybody, and so they'll benefit from all your knowledge of what it's been like to be in Afghanistan and mental health issues that continue in our country and around the world. Thank you for what you've done.
Thank you for having me.
Dominic, you've been doing a lot of projects. I mean, you're a
Mhm.
musician, you're a composer. I have to congratulate you on taking the time and the effort to get out a message like this because you could be working on it, all your new albums, you can be working on other collaborations, but you have chose to really share this very important and emotional story. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I love the work.
Once again, this is Behind the Lines, a 9/11 story. Now, we have to emphasize these are private performances that will be taking place on March 13th and 16th at New York City's The Sheen Center. But there will be upcoming performances for you, the public, very soon, and we will let you know all about them. Gentlemen, it's an honor to talk to all of you. Thanks again.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.